Indonesia wants a new capital and it's spending nearly $33 billion to get it. The Indonesian government's plan is to move the capital from Jakarta on the island of Java 2,000 kilometers away to a new purpose-built city called Nusantara in East Kalimantan province on the island of Borneo. The relocation is expected to take decades, but the plan is to move the first government offices and bureaucrats there starting 2024. But why move a capital? Here's some answers.
Jakarta is disappearing, slowly being swallowed by the sea. An abandoned mosque, now a monument to the city's bleak future. Scientists estimate as much as a third of it could be lost by 2050. Millions are at risk.
Why is the water level now higher than my home? Why am I now living below the water level? Maybe because the seawater is swallowing the soil little by little. That's all I know. But luckily we now have that seawall.
The sea defences, though, are showing cracks. The thousands of shacks that dot the shoreline here flood regularly, leaving behind hazardous waste and pollution.
In the past, it wasn't like this. It was nicer and the seawater was good. The beach sand was nice and we could still play in the water. Now we can't do that anymore. The water's murky and dirty. It floods every high tide.
Jakarta owes its dilemma to climate change and poor resource management. Excessive groundwater use has led to massive subsidence. The city is sinking. Residents are heading, if not for higher ground, then higher floors, resigned to chaos.
Today I'm not so nervous about the flooding. In the past, when the floods came, I used to tremble. I nearly drowned back in 2007. All my belongings were swept away, and I had to start all over again.
The government too is planning a fresh start, hoping to relocate the capital to Borneo. Such drastic measures aren't an option for the poor Jakartans living on the edge of this unfolding disaster.
And joining me now for more is Dr. Eka Permanasari. She's an associate professor in urban design at Monash University, Indonesia, and is currently in Berlin. Dr. Permanasari, welcome. Given that Jakarta is literally sinking, is building a new capital the only option?
Well, as you mentioned, the current capital city is sinking at the rapid stage. It's the fastest sinking city in the world. And therefore, there were so many attempts in order to rescue Jakarta. Now, those attempts seem to be failed, and now they decided that they have to move the capital city to Kalimantan. Now, talking about the movement, whether it's necessary or not, of course, there has always been a debate. But looking at this from multiple perspectives, for instance, finding a new location in central Kalimantan carries two meanings, actually. One is detaching the power from the Javanese centrism and giving the chance for other location as the center of power, right, as a government or economy. Another thing is, it is seen as a political move which shows the world that Kalimantan as the center of the nation. So we all know that Kalimantan or Borneo has been the source of oxygen, not only for Indonesia, but also it's actually for the world, right? By putting this capital city, it is a bold statement that this is the center of Indonesia. So I think there are two things, yeah? One is like detaching itself from the Javanese
I did want to talk to you about that, but it's good that you've brought it up. But having said that, I mean, I'd just like to know from you, what does this mean for the people who live in Jakarta, some 10 million people who call Jakarta home? Will everyone now be able to move to Nusantara? Is that the idea?
Well, there are some phases for the movement. Say, for instance, this planning of the capital is starting from the 2022 to 2045. The first stage, or the first phase, is the first 2 years, that is until 2024, which they will build the core government sector, yeah, and they will move. The first one that they will move is not the whole Jakarta people. I think Jakarta, regardless, is no longer a capital. It will work as the center of economy. And remember that Jakarta carries layers of symbolism for colonial till post-colonial, so it will not lose its charisma, yeah, as a city. But this new capital, by 2024, they will move the civil servants, the ministries, agencies, employees, and all that, army, police, and all that. So the first stage until 2024, they plan to have 488,000 of people.
Right.
And then second stage, until 2029, they will bring more people and they will lay out some infrastructure and so on until 2045. So I don't think they will move the whole 10 million to the new capital.
Well, that's good to have that clarification. I do want to talk to you more about this move. If you wouldn't mind staying on the line, Dr. Permanasari, because I'd like to offer our viewers now a glimpse of what this new city, Nusantara, is supposed to look like. Now, these computer-generated images show a starkly different city compared to what Jakarta currently is. Lots of green spaces and open walkways. A city surrounded by lush jungle, free from the congestion and pollution of the capital. All residents are expected to be within a 10-minute walk of green spaces, and every high-rise is expected to be constructed in an eco-friendly manner and be energy efficient. So clean, green and high-tech. But as building begins, locals and environmentalists are already warning of the impact. DW's Asia-Pacific Bureau Chief Georg Martes reports.
Carving out a presidential dream. This is where one day the heart of Indonesia's new capital will beat, on a remote patch of land deep inside a vast eucalyptus plantation. For decades, Indonesian governments focused on the development of the island of Java and its crowded and congested capital, Jakarta. But President Joko Widodo wants to change that and bring money and development to the island of Borneo too, starting from scratch at this point. 50,000 soccer pitches of eucalyptus plantation will over time give way to Nusantara, Indonesia's new capital. It's supposed to be a green and smart global city, a capital set to draw all its energy from renewable sources, surrounded by a lush rainforest. But not all of the area planned for the future metropolis is yet owned by the government, and that poses a problem. The indigenous population often lacks papers for the lands they have lived on for generations, tells me this local chief. And he says they are not being offered a fair deal.
They bring their rules from Jakarta, but these rules don't fit here. The price of land in the new capital area is already 1,300 euros per square metre. But we are only being paid 2 euros per square metre. If we sell, where can we buy land again? Anywhere around here, that's impossible. They are slowly driving us out.
Adi Kustaman, the local government representative, tells me there are clear procedures for compensation. Nobody has to worry. He sees big economic benefits on the horizon for both the locals and for newcomers he hopes to attract from Java. 1.9 million people are supposed to reside in Nusantara by 2045.
There are no earthquakes, no tsunamis. There are no social conflicts involving tribal, religious or racial issues. It's the ideal mini Indonesia here.
But what about the city's impact on the nature outside its boundaries? For instance, on the mangrove forests further downstream in the delta of Balikpapan.
Around sunset, they start to come and sleep. See?
Oh, now you
see on top.
Yeah. Conservationist Carnilla Villard shows me a family of protected proboscis monkeys. She fears that sediment and pollution from the new capital could destroy the pristine landscape here.
The bay will be like a transportation gate to the capital area, right? It's the water gate to the capital area. And on the same time, it is where all of those protected species are there.
The government has recently announced plans to enlarge the existing mangrove forest, but what is not clear yet is how all of this is being paid for. With 80% of the financing for the new capital expected to come from the private sector, the government's vision of a green capital could end up being at odds with the reality of big business demands.
Dr. Permanasari, I think you heard that report. I'd like to get your views on this as well. How environmentally sound are the plans for the new capital?
Well, I think that report is very good in capturing the situation on the ground. While the policy seems to cover all good aspects, like they have all these 8 principles, say, for instance, designing based on the natural condition, circular and resilient, low carbon emission, and so on. And they translate these 8 principles into certain KPIs. For instance, 75% green areas for the government complex, and so on. But bear in mind that this is a very top-down policy, and the question remains, like, how would you translate that to the local context? How can you ensure that these things will be implemented, And are they ready? The community, the local stakeholders. And if you would like to have this as a green, as smart and sustainable as possible, we have to work on the ground, not only on the top level. So I think this is something that the government should be aware of.
And I think this is something that we'll be discussing in the coming months. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, but thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Eka Permanasari from Monash University, Indonesia. Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you.